"Mom, he's my brother," cried little Theodore, only 8 years old, pointing to a black boy rummaging through a trash can outside the five-star restaurant where they were having dinner. Imagine this, a child's innocent words unraveling a secret that could shatter a millionaire's world. Businesswoman Victoria Hartwell almost choked on her $1,000 French wine when she heard her son's words. Her blue eyes widened as she saw the dirty, skinny boy Theodore was watching through the window with disturbing intensity. "Don't be ridiculous, dear," she whispered, pulling Theodore back to the elegant table. "You don't have any brothers. It's just the two of us, remember?" But Theodore wriggled free of his mother's hands and ran toward the restaurant door. Wait until you hear what happens next. Black Voices brings you a story that will leave you speechless. Victoria's blood ran cold as she watched her son run toward the street urchin, who couldn't have been more than 9 years old and was clearly neglected. "Hey!" Theodore shouted, catching up to the boy. You look like me." The black boy lifted his face, revealing facial features that made Victoria stagger. The same almond-shaped eyes, the same nose, the same small scar on his left eyebrow that Theodore had since he was a baby. "My name is Thomas," said the boy in a hoarse voice, as if he hadn't spoken in days. "Who are you?" Victoria watched the scene from afar, her hands shaking uncontrollably. That identical scar couldn't be a coincidence. She remembered perfectly the day when Theodore, only 2 years old, had fallen and cut his eyebrow at the playground. "Theodore Hartwell," replied her son, extending his grease-stained hand to the street boy. "Do you want something to eat? My mom has a lot of money." Thomas looked over Theodore's shoulder and saw Victoria standing at the restaurant door, completely pale. Something in her expression made him instinctively step back. "No thanks," Thomas muttered, picking up a torn backpack. "I have to go." "Wait," Theodore ran after him. "Why do you have the same scar as me? Look here." He pointed to his own eyebrow. Victoria felt her legs buckle. After 8 years of raising Theodore alone, always telling him that his father had died in an accident, that scene transported her to a memory she had tried to bury forever. Flashback. 8 years ago, Victoria was in the hospital, pregnant and unmarried. Dr. Richardson, the family's private physician, had told her it would be best to give the baby up for adoption. "A single mother is not ideal for your business reputation, Victoria. Let me take care of everything." But when Theodore was born, she changed her mind completely. She wanted to keep the baby. Dr. Richardson had assured her that he would take care of everything and that there would be no complications. Back in the present, Victoria watched Theodore talking animatedly with Thomas, who was now smiling for the first time. The resemblance between them was impossible to ignore. "Theodore," she called, her voice trembling. "Come here now." But something in the way Thomas smiled, the way he held Theodore's hand, awakened a maternal feeling in Victoria that she had never felt before. It was as if a part of her that had been dormant for years had just awakened. Theodore ran back, pulling Thomas by the hand. "Mother, Thomas has nowhere to sleep. Can he stay with us tonight?" Victoria looked at Thomas, really looked at him, and saw in those tired eyes the same determination she saw in Theodore every day. The same stubbornness, the same intelligence shining through years of suffering. How did you get that scar?" she asked, her voice almost inaudible. Thomas touched his eyebrow automatically. "I fell when I was little. The lady at the orphanage said it was when I was about 2. Victoria's world collapsed. If this story of justice and family discoveries is touching your heart, don't forget to subscribe to Black Voices to find out how a simple coincidence would reveal secrets that would change 3 lives forever. Because sometimes, fate uses an 8-year-old child to expose truths that adults have spent years trying to bury. Victoria drove Thomas and Theodore home that night, her hands shaking on the steering wheel as she watched the 2 boys chatting in the back seat like childhood friends. The resemblance between them was impossible to ignore. Not just physical, but in the way they gestured, the cadence of their speech, even the way they tilted their heads when they were thinking. "Thomas," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Do you remember anything about when you were a baby? Any details about how you got to the orphanage?" The boy shook his head, playing with a toy Theodore had insisted on lending him. they just told me I was found in a box near a private hospital. Sister Margaret always said that someone very rich didn't want me. Victoria felt her stomach churn. A private hospital, exactly where Theodore had been born. That night, after putting the two boys to bed, Thomas in the guest room, still suspicious, but visibly excited about his first soft bed in years, Victoria went up to the attic and looked for the box that held her pregnancy documents. Her hands trembled as she leafed through the yellowed papers. There it was, Richardson Private Clinic, delivery at 3:47 a.m., but something was wrong. She vaguely remembered hearing a baby cry long after Theodore was born. She remembered asking about it and Dr. Richardson saying it was just echoes in the hallway. A suppressed memory began to surface. She had been sedated, but she had awakened briefly and heard voices in the hallway. The second baby has been transferred as arranged. The adoptive family is waiting. Second baby. The words echoed in her mind like a nightmare. Victoria remembered how she had questioned Dr. Richardson about gaining only 4 pounds during a pregnancy that felt so heavy. Single babies can be bigger, he had explained with that paternal smile that now made her nauseous. Your body is just adjusting well. She also remembered the strange appointments, always at specific times, never when other patients were present. Dr. Richardson always insisted on private ultrasounds, claiming that his clinic offered more personalized care for VIP clients. The next morning, Victoria called the clinic. The receptionist informed her that Dr. Richardson had abruptly retired 2 years after Theodore's birth and moved to another state. Strange, the woman commented, he left the clinic in the middle of an investigation into adoption irregularities. We never heard the outcome. Victoria hung up the phone, her hands shaking. The investigation into adoption irregularities. She hired a private investigator that same afternoon. Within 48 hours, she received a report that made her world completely collapse. Dr. Richardson was under investigation for participating in an illegal scheme to separate twins from wealthy single mothers. The babies were sold to different families with the buyers never knowing they were only getting half a pair. Upper-class single mothers were preferred targets, the report read. The doctor would heavily sedate them during delivery and forge documents showing only one baby. The second was sold on the black market for adoption. The report revealed even more sinister details. Dr. Richardson specifically chose mothers who had no close family or partners present during delivery. Victoria fit the profile perfectly. A successful young businesswoman, pregnant from a casual relationship that had ended, with no close relatives in the city. The scheme generated profits of $200,000 to $500,000 per transaction, the document continued. Wealthy families paid exorbitant sums for babies who met specific appearance criteria. Victoria ran to the bathroom and vomited violently. Her son had been sold as merchandise. Thomas had spent 8 years on the streets because someone had profited $500,000 from the separation of her twin sons. Over the next few days, Victoria watched Thomas slowly adjust to his new life. He ate as if every meal were his last, instinctively stashed pieces of bread in his pockets, and woke up in the middle of the night to check that he was still in a real bed. Mom, Theodore had asked one morning, why does Thomas have nightmares every night? He screams in his sleep. That afternoon, she found Thomas and Theodore playing in the garden. Theodore was teaching Thomas to play tennis, and the black boy showed the same natural coordination and competitiveness as his brother. They laughed the same way, had the same reflexes, the same expression of intense concentration. But Victoria also noticed the painful differences. Thomas instinctively shrank away when adults approached him too quickly. He ate silently, as if making noise were dangerous. His hands were calloused from years of searching for food and shelter. Mother, Theodore ran to her. Thomas is really my brother, isn't he? I can feel it. It's as if I had a part of me that was lost, and now it's back. Victoria knelt down and hugged both boys, tears streaming down her face. Yes, my love. You are brothers. And someone very cruel separated us. Thomas, still processing everything, asked in a small voice, does that mean I don't have to live on the streets anymore? Never again, Victoria promised, her voice filled with a determination that surprised even her. And the person who did this to us will pay. That night, Victoria did something she hadn't done in years. She prayed, not for forgiveness or understanding, but for enough strength to make Dr. Richardson pay for every night Thomas had gone hungry, for every moment of fear he had faced alone, for every tear she had shed, thinking she was crazy for feeling that something was missing. Thomas had told her about the times he slept in cardboard boxes under overpasses, about how he learned to run faster than the adults who tried to hurt him, about the days when he couldn't find anything to eat and drank water from puddles in the rain. Each new humiliation Thomas described about his life on the streets only fueled something inside Victoria that his oppressors couldn't see, a maternal fury being shaped by the very injustice they had tried to impose on her family. What Dr. Richardson didn't know was that every year of suffering he had caused was writing his own sentence of defeat. Victoria spent the next few weeks turning her pain into strategy. During the day, she cared for Thomas and Theodore as if nothing had changed. But in the quiet nights of her mansion, she was meticulously engineering Dr. Richardson's downfall. The first step was to hire Sarah Chun, a lawyer specializing in crimes against children who had a reputation for never losing a case. When Victoria showed her all the documentation she had gathered, Sarah was silent for several long minutes. "This is one of the most elaborate schemes I've ever seen," Sarah murmured, leafing through the investigator's report. "But Victoria, we need more, much more. A man like Richardson doesn't do this alone, and he certainly didn't do it just once." Victoria nodded, already expecting this response. "How much time do you need? 6 months? Maybe a year. We're going to find every family he destroyed." Meanwhile, Dr. Richardson was living comfortably in his mansion in the suburbs of Chicago, completely oblivious to the storm brewing. He had legally changed his name to Robert Richardson Hayes and now worked as a medical consultant for private fertility clinics. The man had built a new identity based on motivational lectures about medical ethics and difficult cases. The irony was grotesque. He profited by telling distorted versions of his own crimes, presenting himself as a doctor who had faced complex moral dilemmas during his career. When his secretary mentioned that a Victoria Hartwell had called asking about old appointments, he just laughed dismissively. "Hartwell, I don't remember that name. Must be some old patient trying to sue over something trivial. Tell her I don't take appointments related to old deliveries anymore." What Dr. Richardson didn't realize was that Victoria had already tracked down his new address, his new identity, and had been documenting his every move for weeks. She had hired a private investigator to follow his routine, photograph his appointments, and record his public lectures where he cynically spoke about ethical dilemmas in medicine. Sarah Chun worked tirelessly connecting Victoria with other families who had fallen victim to the scheme. They soon discovered that Dr. Richardson had separated at least 12 pairs of twins over the course of 8 years. Some families never knew they had lost a child. Others, like Victoria, carried an inexplicable feeling that something was missing. "We found Jennifer Walsh," Sarah said on a rainy March afternoon. "She gave birth to twins 6 years ago. She was left with only one girl. The second baby was sold to a wealthy family in Connecticut." Victoria's stomach churned. "Does she know?" "She does now, and she's furious." Jennifer Walsh was willing to testify. So was Michael Torres, who lost a twin son sold to a European family, and Lisa Morrison, whose twins were separated and one sold to a celebrity family who never knew of the child's illegal origins. One by one, Sarah brought the broken families together. Each new story fueled Victoria's determination. It wasn't just about Thomas and Theodore. It was about all those families who had their hearts broken by the greed of a man hiding behind a medical degree. During this time, Victoria watched Thomas slowly integrate into his new life. The boy still woke up in the middle of the night to check that he was really in bed, that Theodore was still there, that this new world wasn't just another cruel dream. "Mommy," Theodore asked one morning, "why does Thomas still hide food under his bed?" I explained that there would always be food here. I hugged her son, patiently explaining that Thomas needed time to believe he was safe. Every protective gesture the two boys made toward each other only intensified her fury toward Richardson. "We have something," Sarah said one morning in April, placing a thick folder on Victoria's desk. Richardson kept detailed records of everything, every transaction, every buying family, every amount received. And best of all, he still has those files. Victoria raised an eyebrow. How do you know? Because we know he's trying to sell the information to a documentary filmmaker. He wants to turn his own criminality into profit by telling the story as if it were just a medical mistake from the past. The man's arrogance was staggering. Even after all these years, Dr. Richardson still saw his victims as a source of income. He had set up meetings with 3 different documentary producers, trying to auction off his own confession to the highest bidder. Sarah continued. He set up a meeting with a documentary filmmaker for next week. He's going to take all the original files with him to prove his version of the story. Victoria smiled for the first time in months. This was the perfect opportunity. There's something else, Sarah said hesitantly. Richardson didn't just sell the babies. He kept in touch with some of the families who bought them, charging them extra over the years, a kind of blackmail disguised as medical follow-up. The information made Victoria feel nauseous. The man had created a perpetual money-making machine out of the suffering of children and families. That night, she went up to the room where Thomas and Theodore slept. The 2 boys were hugging each other in the same bed, finally reunited after 8 years of forced separation. Thomas still had occasional nightmares, but Theodore's presence calmed him instantly. "You don't know it yet," Victoria whispered, tucking the blanket around them. "But soon the man who separated us will find out what it means to face a mother who has gotten her children back." She had spent years feeling incomplete, thinking she was going mad. Now she knew that every maternal instinct she had ever had been right. And Dr. Richardson was about to discover that he had completely underestimated the woman he had stolen from. Victoria wasn't just seeking justice. She was building a trap so elaborate that Richardson himself would deliver all the evidence of his crimes right into her hands. And when that happened, there would be no place in the world where he could hide from the storm he had created by separating a mother from her children. What Richardson didn't know was that every arrogant move he made, every attempt to profit from his criminal past, was being carefully documented by someone who had turned her pain into a relentless strategy for revenge. The meeting was set for a Tuesday in Bridger in May at the elegant Continental Hotel. Dr. Richardson arrived on time, carrying an Italian leather briefcase filled with the criminal records he planned to sell to the documentary filmmaker for $150,000. "Mr. Johnson," he asked the man sitting in the lobby, an undercover investigator Sarah Chun had hired to pose as the interested producer. "Dr. Richardson, finally we meet," smiled the fake Johnson, shaking the doctor's hand. "I'm sure your story will be fascinating for our documentary on ethical dilemmas in medicine." Richardson smiled with his characteristic arrogance. "I hope you have the money ready. My experience with complex adoptions is worth every penny I'm asking." What Richardson didn't know was that every word was being recorded by high-tech equipment hidden in the lobby. Nor did he notice the 3 families sitting strategically in different corners of the hotel: Jennifer Walsh with her daughter, Michael Torres with his son, and Lisa Morrison accompanied by a lawyer. "Tell me about these adoption cases," Johnson asked, discreetly turning on a tape recorder. "I hear they were unique situations." "Unique?" Richardson opened the folder with morbid pride. "They were twins in most cases, upper-class single mothers who didn't know they were carrying 2 babies. I would separate the births, keep one with a mother, and sell the other." The words came out naturally, as if it were a professional achievement. Johnson feigned admiration. "How many cases were there?" 12 pairs over 8 years. I made about $4.2 million in total." Richardson chuckled. The trick was to sedate the mothers properly. They never remembered the birth. It was at that moment that Victoria appeared, walking calmly toward their table. Richardson recognized her instantly, his face turning pale as if he had seen a ghost. "Victoria Hartwell," she said, sitting down without invitation. "Or would you prefer I say, the mother whose child was stolen?" Richardson swallowed hard, his hands shaking slightly. I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you do," Victoria smiled coldly, placing a tablet on the table. "Thomas, come here, sweetheart." Thomas appeared at the side of the table, his eyes fixed on Richardson. The doctor was completely unresponsive when he saw the boy he had sold years ago. "Do you remember him?" Victoria asked. The baby you sold for $280,000 to a family in Connecticut? The same baby who was abandoned in a dumpster when the police raid broke up the scheme? Richardson tried to stand up, but Johnson, actually the investigator, held him firmly in place. "Sit down, doctor. The conversation isn't over." Victoria continued, her voice gaining strength. "You know what's interesting? You just confessed everything we needed to hear." Every word was recorded and broadcast live to the authorities. At that moment, Jennifer Walsh approached the table. "Remember me, doctor? October 2018. You said I only had one daughter." Michael Torres also stood up. "What about me?" March 2017. "My son Marcus was sold to a family in Europe." Richardson looked around desperately, realizing he was surrounded by all the families he had destroyed. "You don't understand," he stammered. "I was just helping families who couldn't have children for $280,000 each." Victoria laughed bitterly. "And on top of that, keeping detailed records to blackmail the buying families later." Richardson's briefcase was now in the hands of Sarah Chun, who had approached silently. "Dr. Robert Richardson Hayes, real name Robert Richardson, you're under arrest for child trafficking, fraud, document forgery, and extortion." The federal agents who had been disguised in the hotel revealed themselves, placing Richardson in handcuffs. He looked around in panic, finally understanding the extent of the trap. "You can't do this," he shouted at Victoria. "I'm a respected doctor." "You were," Victoria replied calmly. "Now you're just a criminal who will spend the rest of your life paying for every family you destroyed." Sarah Chun opened Richardson's briefcase and showed its contents to the cameras that had been discreetly called. "Here are the complete records of 12 cases of illegal separation of twins, including amounts paid, identities of the purchasing families, and even photos of the babies being handed over." Richardson was led away in handcuffs while shouting about his rights, but no one in the lobby showed the slightest sympathy. Victoria hugged Thomas, who watched everything with a mixture of relief and justice being served. As the revelations piled up and Richardson was taken away to face decades in prison, one question remained: would it be possible for all those broken families to finally find the peace they had lost years ago? And what lessons could that victory teach about the power of a mother determined to protect her children? 2 years after the trial that sentenced Dr. Richardson to 35 years in prison, Victoria watched Thomas and Theodore playing in the garden of her new mansion, bought with part of the $12 million compensation she had received from the state. Thomas, now 10, attended the same elite private school as Theodore. His grades were among the best in his class, and he had discovered a natural talent for math that impressed his teachers. The emotional scars from his years on the streets still showed up occasionally, but family therapy had worked miracles. "Mom," Theodore ran up to her, followed by Thomas. Thomas won the school science fair. He's going to represent the state in the national competition. Victoria hugged both her sons, feeling her heart overflow with pride. The connection between the twins was extraordinary. They finished each other's sentences and developed a language of their own that only they understood. Dr. Richardson discovered that the prison reserved special treatment for doctors who sold babies. In 6 months, he was transferred 3 times for security issues. His bank account had been completely drained by compensation payments, and his ex-wife had divorced him publicly, taking the house and his reputation with her. Sarah Chun kept Victoria informed. "He's still trying to appeal the sentence. But with all the confessions on tape, he doesn't stand a chance." The other prisoners found out what he did. The case had become a legal landmark. The Victoria Hartwell Act was passed in Congress, creating mandatory protocols for recording births in private hospitals. Victoria testified before the Senate, becoming a respected voice for children's rights. 10 of the 12 sets of twins have been reunited. Sarah smiled. Jennifer Walsh found her second daughter. The adoptive parents were devastated to learn of the illegal origin, but they are cooperating. Victoria had created the Thomas and Theodore Foundation, offering free legal resources to families who had been victims of similar schemes. The work had already identified 3 other criminal doctors, resulting in 45 families being reunited. In prison, Richardson received 200 letters a week from victim families telling him how they were rebuilding their lives. Ironically, those letters became his worst punishment, forcing him to confront the suffering he had caused. Thomas showed his science project on missing children in the U.S. "I want to help other children like me," he explained with a determination that moved Victoria. "No child should go through what I went through." Theodore founded a school club raising funds for orphanages. If Thomas had to live like that, other children may be going through the same thing. The school had been transformed. What began as resistance from elitist parents toward the street kid turned into admiration when Thomas surpassed most of his classmates academically. Victoria never responded when Richardson tried to contact her to ask for forgiveness. Her energy was focused on the future, not the past. "The best revenge," she said in lectures on children's rights, "is not to destroy those who hurt you. It is to build something so extraordinary that it renders irrelevant any damage they tried to cause." The foundation had become her passion. 3 states had already adopted versions of the Victoria Hartwell law, and the social impact was immense. That night, Thomas asked, "Mom, do you think Dr. Richardson is sorry?" Victoria thought carefully. "I don't know, sweetheart, but his regret doesn't matter. What matters is that we turned our pain into something that helps other families." Theodore added, "And that we're now a complete family." Watching Thomas and Theodore grow up as inseparable brothers, Victoria knew she had discovered a fundamental truth. A mother's heart is never wrong. She had always known something was missing. And now, finally whole, she was using her experience to ensure that no other family would ever go through what they had. If this story of maternal determination and justice touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to Black Voices for more stories that prove that the most painful truth can become the greatest victory of our lives.